In a storm-soaked city, a single mother struggling to keep her family afloat after losing her job opens her door to a lost elderly woman and a frightened young boy. Her small act of kindness, born from a heart that refuses to break, sparks a chain of events that transforms her life and weaves a community together. This is a story of resilience, compassion, and the unexpected strength found in shared humanity. Maya Johnson sat at her wobbly kitchen table, her fingers threading a needle through a patchwork quilt, each stitch a small act of defiance against the chaos pressing in on her life. The fabric, a patchwork of salvaged scraps, faded denim, soft yellow cotton, and scraps of crimson flannel, felt like a map of her heart, pieced together from thrift store bins and late-night determination. Her small apartment, nestled in a weathered corner of a mid-sized city, carried the faint scent of boiled cabbage from dinner and the damp chill of a radiator that sputtered more than it warmed. In the next room, her children, Amari, 8, and Nia, 6, slept under a pile of mismatched blankets, their soft snores a quiet rhythm against the storm raging outside. Maya, a 34-year-old single black mother, had been let go from her job at the clothing factory 4 weeks ago when new machines replaced the hands of half the workers, leaving her with a thin envelope of savings and a stack of bills that grew faster than her hope. The manager's words still echoed. Budget cuts, automation, nothing personal, as she'd stood with other women, their faces mirroring her own quiet dread. Her Etsy shop, Patchwork Dreams, was now her only income. Each sale of a quilted coaster or potholder, a lifeline to milk, bread, or the medicine Amari needed when his cough flared up. Milk was $5 a gallon now, bread inching toward $3, and the electric bill sat unopened on the counter, its weight heavier than the paper it was printed on. Yet Maya's spirit held firm, rooted in the stubborn kindness her grandmother had instilled in her, the kind that found joy in small things. A shared laugh with Nia, Amari's crayon drawings taped to the fridge. The apartment was humble, its walls marked by peeling paint, the couch sagging under a pile of clean laundry she hadn't had time to fold, and a window pane stuffed with an old towel to block the draft. But it was hers, paid for with every ounce of her pride, even when it meant eating rice for dinner 3 nights in a row to make rent. Outside, a late fall storm battered the city, turning the streets into shallow streams, the sky a deep, bruised purple that matched the ache in Maya's chest. She glanced at the window where she'd hung a small display of her quilts, bright throws and delicate placemats, hoping to catch the eye of neighbors, though the rain tonight ensured no one would pass by. The wind howled, rattling the loose window pane, and she sighed, setting her quilt aside to check on her kids. Amari lay sprawled across his bed, a comic book open beside him, one sock missing while Nia curled tightly around a stuffed rabbit Maya had sewn from an old sweater, its button eyes slightly uneven, but loved. Tiptoeing back to the kitchen, Maya's phone buzzed, a $15 order for a quilted bookmark set, enough for a loaf of bread and maybe a small jar of jam if she skipped the good brand. She whispered a quiet thank you, her heart lifting briefly, though the looming gas bill tugged. It backed down. The storm grew fiercer, rain pounding the roof like a heartbeat, and Maya pulled on her faded hoodie, its cuffs frayed from years of wear, to rescue her outdoor quilt display before the wind tore it apart. She opened the front door, the cold biting her cheeks, and stepped onto the stoop, her breath catching in the wet air. The street was empty, the storm's roar swallowing all other sounds, and as she reached for the wooden rack holding her crafts, she felt a strange stillness, a moment of pause before something unknown. Unaware that this simple act, braving the rain to save a few scraps of fabric, would soon weave her life into a larger, unexpected pattern, Maya steeled herself against the downpour, her heart steady despite the uncertainty, ready to face whatever the night would bring. The storm outside Maya Johnson's apartment roared like a living thing, its rain lashing the windows and turning the street into a shimmering maze of puddles under flickering streetlights. As Maya stepped onto the stoop to rescue her quilt display, a sharp plaintive cry cut through the downpour, fragile yet piercing, like a child's voice lost in the wind. She froze, squinting into the grey veil of rain, and saw 2 figures struggling toward her gate, an elderly woman, her thin frame bent under a sodden shawl, and a small boy, no more than 5, his hand gripped tightly in hers, his sneakers splashing, through water that soaked him to the knees. The woman's steps faltered, her head turning as if chasing a memory the storm had stolen, while the boy's face, pale and streaked with rain, locked onto Maya with a desperate trust that made her heart lurch. "Come here quick, you'll freeze out there," Maya called, her voice steady despite the chills seeping into her bones, waving them toward the open door. The boy tugged the woman forward, and Maya ushered them inside, the warmth of her apartment, wrapping around them like a quilt, carrying the faint scent of boiled cabbage and the soft glow of her sewing lamp. She grabbed towels from a stack by the door, kneeling to wrap one around the boy first, his small body trembling as he pressed against her, his wet jacket dripping onto the floor. "I'm Maya," she said, her voice soft but firm, meeting his wide, frightened eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" He sniffled, wiping his nose with a soggy sleeve. "Liam. And this is my grandma, Evelyn." The woman, Evelyn, stood just inside the doorway, her shawl dripping a small puddle, her eyes distant, lips moving in a silent murmur, as if speaking to someone long gone. Maya guided her to the sagging couch, noticing the tremble in her hands and the vacant look that stirred memories of her aunt's dementia, a fog that stole names and places but left raw emotion behind. "Let's get you dry, Miss Evelyn," Maya said, draping a towel over her shoulders, her touch gentle but sure. Liam's voice broke, small and shaky. "She didn't know me today. We were at the library, and she started talking about finding her sister. Then she just walked out, into the rain." Maya's chest tightened, but she kept her face calm, nodding as she moved to the kitchen. Her pantry was nearly bare, a half box of macaroni, a can of broth, a few crackers. But she set to work, the gas stove flickering as she stirred a pot, the familiar rhythm grounding her. She thought of her own children, Amari and Nia, asleep, down the hall, and how she'd stretched every meal to keep them fed. This was no different. She had enough to share, even if it was little. She poured 2 bowls of macaroni mixed with broth, setting them on the coffee table with a handful of crackers, and knelt beside Liam. "Eat slow, it's hot," she said, brushing a wet curl from his forehead. He nodded, clutching the spoon, his eyes darting to Evelyn, who stared at the bowl, her fingers twitching. "I was supposed to get apples," Evelyn murmured, her voice thin. "The store's by the river, isn't it?" Maya touched her arm, her voice low and soothing. "You're at my place now, Miss Evelyn, safe and warm. Just try a bite." The room filled with the quiet clink of Liam's spoon and the storm's steady drum, and Maya watched them eat, her heart swelling with a warmth that had nothing to do with the radiator. Liam glanced up, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Miss Maya. Nobody else stopped to help us." She smiled, her throat tight, seeing the weight this boy carried, his love for his grandmother anchoring him despite his fear. Evelyn took a small bite, her eyes flickering with a moment of clarity, then fading back to confusion, and Maya felt a pang of recognition. She'd seen that look in her aunt, the way the mind could slip, but the heart held fast. She pulled a quilt from a nearby basket, draping it over Liam's shoulders, its bright patches a contrast to his soaked clothes. "You're safe here," she told him, and he leaned into the quilt, his shivering easing. Maya stood, checking the stove to hide the ache in her chest, knowing this act of kindness was stretching her resources thin, but feeling it was right, like a stitch that held a seam together. She glanced at the clock, nearly 9, the storm showing no sign of slowing, and knew she'd stay up as long as needed to keep these two safe. Liam's small hand reached for hers, his fingers cold but firm, and he said, "You're nice, like my mom when she's not working." Maya squeezed his hand, her heart catching at the trust in his eyes, and she thought of her own children, how she'd do anything to shield them from the world's storms. As she sat back down, watching Evelyn's slow, uncertain movements and Liam's protective glances, Maya felt a quiet resolve settle in her bones. This night, this moment of opening her door, was a thread she'd chosen to pull, one that might unravel into something bigger than she could yet see. The storm's roar softened to a faint patter against Maya Johnson's apartment windows as midnight settled in. But rest was far from her mind as she sat vigil in her worn armchair, her gaze flickering between the two strangers, who now filled her small living room with a quiet, fragile presence. Liam, the 5-year-old boy, lay curled on a nest of pillows and blankets on the floor. His small hands clutching a quilted coaster Maya had slipped into his grasp, its bright patches a comfort against his lingering shivers. His soft snores mingled with the creak of the radiator, a steady reminder of the warmth she fought to maintain. Evelyn, his grandmother, rested uneasily on the sagging couch, her breathing ragged, her forehead slick with a fever that had crept in with the damp chill of the storm. Maya leaned forward, dabbing a cool, damp cloth across Evelyn's brow, her movements gentle but precise, guided by memories of tending to her aunt during the slow, heartbreaking fade of dementia. Evelyn stirred, her lips murmuring names: Clara, Samuel, someone called Blue, none of them Liam, her words a disjointed tapestry of memories unraveling in the dark. Liam's eyes fluttered open at one point, catching the flicker of Maya's candlelight, and he whispered, "She was reading me a train book at the library. She was okay then, but she said she had to find Aunt Clara, who's been gone forever." Maya knelt beside him, her voice a low, steady hum like the one she used to soothe Amari through nightmares. "Sometimes, Liam, the mind wanders to old places, like it's trying to find home, but your grandma's heart knows you, even when she's lost." His tears welled, and he asked, "Will she forget me for good?" Maya's throat tightened, but she brushed his curls, her smile soft. "Her love for you is stronger than any fog. You're her anchor, kiddo." She tucked the blanket tighter around him, her heart heavy with the weight of his question, a fear she'd once carried for her own family, wondering if love could outlast hardship. As the night deepened, Evelyn's fever spiked, and she rose. Once, her frail frame swaying toward the door, muttering about a red bridge and a promise she had to keep. Maya caught her gently, her hands steady as she guided her back to the couch, whispering, "No bridges tonight, Miss Evelyn. You're safe here. Just rest." Evelyn's eyes, clouded with confusion, met Maya's for a fleeting moment, and her trembling hand gripped Maya's wrist, a silent plea that cut deeper than words. Maya stayed close, checking Evelyn's temperature hourly, her own exhaustion buried under a fierce determination to protect this pair. She thought of Amari and Nia, asleep down the hall, their trust in her a quiet strength that kept her grounded. The candle on the coffee table cast long shadows, dancing across the walls like ghosts of the night's worries, and Maya found herself humming a lullaby her grandmother once sang, a melody that felt like a prayer for endurance. Liam stirred. Again, his voice small but clear. "You're like a superhero, Miss Maya, keeping us safe." She chuckled softly, her heart warming despite the ache in her bones. "Just a mom, Liam. We do what we gotta do for the ones who need us." Around 3 a.m., Evelyn's muttering grew softer, her fever easing slightly, and Maya adjusted the quilt over her, noticing the way her hands unclenched, as if the storm in her mind had calmed for a moment. She sat back, her neck stiff from hours of watching, and felt a strange clarity settle in. This night wasn't just about sheltering two strangers. It was about weaving a bond that felt sacred, like a stitch holding together something broken. Liam's breathing steadied, and he reached out in his sleep, his fingers brushing the edge of Maya's chair, a small gesture that anchored her to the moment. She glanced at the clock, the hours creeping toward dawn, and knew she'd stay awake, as long as needed, guarding this fragile trust. The storm outside had quieted, but inside Maya felt a new strength growing, a thread of connection that promised to stretch beyond this night, binding her to Liam and Evelyn in a way she couldn't yet name. As the storm's last whispers faded into a quiet dawn, the soft light filtering through Maya Johnson's curtains revealed a shift in the small apartment, where Evelyn's fever had finally broken, her breathing now a steady rhythm that eased the tension in the room. Sitting upright on the couch, Evelyn's eyes, once lost in a haze, now held a fragile clarity, and she turned to Liam, curled beside her on the floor, her weathered fingers brushing his cheek with a tenderness that brought a lump to Maya's throat. "Liam, my sweet boy," she whispered, her voice rough but certain, and Liam's eyes snapped open, a grin bursting across his face as he scrambled into her lap, his arms wrapping around her with a force that made her laugh, a soft, surprised sound. Maya, perched on the edge of her armchair, set down the damp cloth she'd used through the night and offered a tired smile. her exhaustion softened by the warmth of their reunion. Evelyn's gaze met hers, brimming with gratitude. "You kept us from the storm, Maya. You gave us a home for the night," she said, her voice cracking as she glanced at Liam. "I remember getting lost, not knowing him. I have Alzheimer's. Diagnosed last spring. I thought I could keep it from my son Marcus to spare him the worry." Maya nodded, her heart aching for Evelyn's silent struggle, and handed her a mug of chamomile tea, the last in her cupboard, its steam curling in the morning light. "You don't have to carry that alone anymore, Miss Evelyn," she said, her tone warm but resolute. Evelyn sipped the tea, her hands steadier now, and shared how she'd taken Liam to the library for a normal day, only for her mind to unravel, pulling her into the rain with no memory of why. Liam, his voice small but clear, added, "I followed her, but she kept saying she had to find someone. I didn't know what to do." Maya knelt beside him, her eyes soft. "You did everything right, Liam. You brought her here, that's what matters." The morning grew brighter, painting the apartment's worn walls in gold, and Evelyn, her clarity sharpening, asked for Maya's phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. "I need to call Marcus, he'll be frantic," she said, and after 2 rings a sharp, panicked voice answered, "Mum, where are you? Are you okay?" Evelyn's tears fell as she reassured him. "I'm safe, Marcus, with a woman who took us in. I'm so sorry." Maya stepped back, giving them space, and moved to the window, where the street glistened with leftover puddles. 30 minutes later, tires crunched on wet pavement, and a sleek grey SUV pulled up, its door flying open. Before it fully stopped, Marcus, a man in his late 30s, stepped out, his dress shirt wrinkled, eyes red from a sleepless night, his stride urgent as he approached the door. Maya opened it before he could knock, her voice calm. "You must be Marcus." He nodded, breathless. "My mum, my son, are they here?" She led him inside, where he dropped to his knees before Evelyn, grasping her hands. "Mum, I called everyone. Police, hospitals. I thought I'd lost you both," he said, his voice breaking. Evelyn touched his cheek. "I didn't want you to know how bad it's gotten. I thought I could manage." Marcus shook his head, then turned to Maya, his gaze softening as he took in the modest room, the quilted coasters on the table, the sewing machine tucked in the corner, the faint hum of the radiator. "How you took them in the middle of a storm?" he asked, his voice thick with awe. Maya shrugged, her tone matter-of-fact. "They were lost. I had a door." He stood, his eyes catching the stack of quilts by the window, their vibrant patterns glowing in the light. "You made these?" he asked, lifting a corner of a star-patterned throw, its stitches tight and intricate. "Lost my job at the factory, so I sell these online. Keeps us going," Maya said, her pride quiet but unshakable. Marcus, who ran a logistics company for artisanal home decor, studied the craftsmanship, his mind turning. "These are special real. We've been searching for artisans like you," he said, then paused, his voice earnest. "You saved my family, Maya. I want to help you, not just because I owe you, but because your work deserves to be seen." Maya blinked, the weight of his words settling slowly, like fabric finding its place in a quilt. "You mean a real business, selling these for real?" she asked, her caution tinged with curiosity. Marcus nodded. "I can get your quilts into stores, markets. I have the network, you have the talent." Evelyn, still holding Liam, smiled softly, her eyes clear and proud, and Liam whispered, "Miss Maya, you're gonna be famous." Maya laughed, a sound that felt lighter than she'd expected, and as she looked at Marcus, a spark of possibility ignited, a chance to weave something bigger than survival, something that could hold her family and others in its folds. In the weeks after that fateful stormy night, Maya Johnson's life began to stitch itself into a new pattern, as her small apartment, once a quiet refuge, became a bustling hub of creativity and hope. With Marcus's guidance, she transformed a dusty corner unit in the local community market into Patchwork Haven, a vibrant shop where shelves overflowed with her quilts, sunflower throws that glowed like summer, star-patterned table runners, with precise stitches and soft baby blankets that felt like a hug. Marcus brought in carpenters to craft sturdy oak display racks, and a local artist who painted the walls a warm terracotta. But he stepped back, insisting Maya shape every detail, from the handwritten tags to the shop's name etched in curling script above the door. "This is your heart, Maya," he said, unpacking a box of her quilts. "I'm just helping it shine." Maya dove into the work, her evenings now spent sketching new designs or folding orders, her fingers moving with a fire she hadn't felt since her factory days. But her vision stretched beyond her own craft. Inspired by Evelyn's resilience and Liam's unwavering trust, she founded Stitches of Strength, a cooperative for women whose hands, like hers, held skill but no stage. She gathered single mothers, laid-off seamstresses and seniors from the neighborhood, teaching them to quilt in a back room filled with the hum of sewing machines and the scent of fresh cotton. Evelyn became a regular, her hands sometimes unsteady but her spirit fierce, guiding newcomers like Tanisha, a quiet teenager from a local shelter, through simple chain stitches. "Hold the needle loose, like you're dancing with it," Evelyn said, her voice patient despite the occasional memory lapse, and Tanisha's hesitant fingers began to find their rhythm, her first coaster sold by week's end. Maya watched these women, some young, some carrying decades of stories, find solace in the act of creation, their voices weaving a tapestry of shared dreams over cups of instant coffee. Amari and Nia, Maya's children, became the shop's unofficial helpers, sorting fabric scraps or sweeping the floor, their laughter mingling with Liam's as the three tied yarn into lopsided bracelets, dubbing themselves the Thread Heroes. Maya's heart swelled, watching Amari show Liam how to fold a quilt corner, a small echo of the kindness she'd shown that rainy night. Marcus took on the business side, building a website that glowed with photos of Maya's work and securing deals with regional boutiques, his logistics network carrying her quilts to places she'd never seen. Orders surged, each sale a small triumph, enough to pay the rent without skipping meals, to buy Nia a new backpack with glittery straps, to tuck a few dollars into a savings jar for the first time in years. The shop drew more than customers. Neighbors lingered, sharing tales of their own. A grandmother who'd quilted wedding gifts, a young man who'd learned to sew from his aunt. Maya listened, her hands busy with thread, offering a nod or a smile that turned strangers into regulars. One afternoon, Carla, a single mother with tired eyes, joined the cooperative, her hands shaky as she admitted, "I haven't sewn since my mom passed. Don't know if I'm any good." Maya handed her a scrap of green cotton, her voice steady. "Start where you are, Carla. We'll figure it out together." By the next week, Carla's quilted potholder sold to a customer who called it a piece of home, and her shy smile lit up the room. The cooperative grew, a sisterhood of hands and hearts, each woman adding her own thread to the fabric of Patchwork Haven. Maya felt her own burdens lighten, not because her struggles vanished, but because she wasn't carrying them alone anymore. The shop's opening day loomed, a milestone that felt like a leap into the unknown, and Maya poured her soul into preparing, hanging a sign that read, "Patchwork Haven," in bold, hand-painted letters. She arranged quilts in bursts of color, each one a story of survival, and set out a table with cider and cookies, a small luxury she could now afford. As she stepped back to survey the space, Evelyn approached, her eyes clear and warm. "You've built more than a shop, Maya," she said, her hand resting on a quilt. "You've made a place where people can heal." Maya's throat tightened, and she nodded, her voice caught in the weight of the moment. The cooperative women gathered, their chatter a soft hum of pride, and Maya saw her own reflection in their faces, women who'd faced storms and kept sewing. Marcus, sleeves rolled up, checked the website on his phone, grinning as he showed Maya the first international order from a small shop in Canada. "Your quilts are crossing borders," he said, and Maya laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. As the opening neared, she felt a flicker of fear. What if this was too big, too fragile? But the sight of Amari and Nia racing through the shop, tying yarn bows on display baskets, grounded her. Patchwork Haven wasn't just a store. It was a promise, a community stitched together by one act of kindness that had grown into something unbreakable. The grand opening of Patchwork Haven hummed with a vibrant energy that seemed to push back the crisp fall chill. as sunlight poured through the shop's wide windows, casting golden patches across the wooden floor where Maya Johnson stood behind the counter, her hands smoothing a quilted table runner with a care that mirrored her heart. The shelves brimmed with creations from the Stitches of Strength cooperative, vibrant sunflower throws, delicate coasters with starburst patterns, and tiny stuffed animals with button eyes, each piece a testament to the women who'd poured their stories into every stitch. Customers, a mix of curious locals and travelers drawn by whispers of the shop's story, moved through the space, their fingers tracing the tight, colorful threads as they murmured admiration. "Who made this?" a woman in a wool scarf asked. Holding up a patchwork scarf, and Maya pointed to the tag. "That's Carla's. She's new, but her hands are magic." The air buzzed with the scent of apple cider and oatmeal cookies, a treat Maya had baked with Amari and Nia, who now darted through the crowd, passing out paper cups with proud grins, their yarn bracelets jingling on their wrists. Liam, Evelyn's grandson, trailed them, his laughter bright as he helped rearrange a display of quilted bookmarks, his small hands careful but eager. The cooperative women, single mothers, seniors and teens like Tanisha, gathered in the back, their chatter a warm undercurrent as they swapped tips on stitching curves or shared quiet stories of their own struggles, their voices weaving a community as strong as their needlework. Evelyn stood among them, her hands steadier today, her eyes bright as she showed a young mother how to knot a thread, her voice soft but sure. "It's not about perfection, it's about feeling the fabric." Maya watched, her heart swelling at the sight of Evelyn finding purpose despite her fading memory, a reminder of the night that started it all. By noon, the cash register chimed steadily, each sale a small victory, enough to cover the month's bills, to buy Amari a new sketchbook, to replace Nia's worn-out sneakers with ones that sparkled. A young couple bought a baby blanket, whispering it was for their soon-to-be-born daughter, while an older man, his hands rough from years of labor, picked up a coaster set, saying, "My sister used to make these, feels like she's here." Maya nodded, her smile warm, her hands busy packing orders but her ears open to every story. Marcus arrived mid-afternoon, his sleeves rolled up, a smudge of paint on his cheek from helping touch up a display, and he leaned against the counter, showing Maya the website analytics on his phone. "We're up to orders from 3 states, and one from Ireland," he said, his grin wide, and Maya shook her head, half laughing. "Ireland? My quilt's in Ireland?" The reality felt like a dream, but the weight of the cash drawer grounded her, a tangible sign of stability she hadn't known in years. As the crowd thinned, Evelyn stepped forward, tapping a spoon against a paper cup, her voice cutting through the hum. "Can I say something?" she asked, and the room stilled, all eyes on her. "A month ago, I was lost in a storm. My mind gone, my grandson scared, and Maya opened her door to us, gave us warmth when she had so little to spare." Her voice trembled but held firm, her gaze settling on Maya. "This shop, these quilts, they're more than things to buy. They're pieces of survival, of heart, and Maya's given that to all of us, a place to belong." The crowd erupted. In applause, some wiping tears, others nodding, and Maya ducked her head, her cheeks warm, her hands gripping the counter to steady herself. Marcus caught her eye, his nod quiet but proud, and whispered, "You're doing it, Maya. You're changing lives." She swallowed, overwhelmed, and stepped outside for a moment, the amber sky painting the market in hues of gold and crimson. A new plaque gleamed beside the door, its words simple but heavy. "In kindness, we find home." A reporter from the local paper approached, her camera clicking as she asked, "Is it true this started with a stranger in a storm?" Maya looked at her, then at the shop, her voice steady. "It started because I opened the door, and that choice built this." Back inside, the women of Stitches of Strength gathered around a table, planning a new line of winter scarves, their laughter a soft music that filled the space. Amari and Nia chased Liam in a game of tag, their yarn-tied thread hero belts flapping, and Maya felt a lump in her throat, not from fear but from the weight of something solid, something lasting. Marcus joined her outside, his hands in his pockets, his voice low. You've made a home here, not just for you, but for everyone." Maya nodded, her eyes tracing the horizon where the sun dipped low, casting long shadows. "I just wanted to keep my kids fed, but this," she gestured to the shop, "this is bigger, it's ours." The fear that it might vanish lingered, but as she watched Tanisha teach a new member a stitch, saw Carla's confident smile, heard Evelyn's gentle laugh, Maya knew this wasn't a dream, it was a foundation, built stitch by stitch from one rainy night. She stepped back inside, joining the women, her heart full, knowing Patchwork Haven was more than a shop. It was a legacy of care, a thread that would hold strong through any storm.